She just guarded gates. That's not real service. That's standing around waiting for something to happen. My uncle said that at 2:47 p.m. on a Saturday afternoon in front of 43 members of my family while I was holding a paper plate with a slice of his birthday cake. I set the plate down on the nearest table. I didn't respond. I didn't need to, because in 11 minutes, a man was going to walk through that door who remembered exactly what happened at Checkpoint Valor on September 14th, 2005. And Raymond Warren, decorated Vietnam veteran, family patriarch, the man who'd spent 30 years telling everyone I just directed traffic, was about to learn what 19 hours of hell actually looked like. If you've ever had someone dismissing your sacrifice because they couldn't see the scars, hit that like button and subscribe. Let me tell you how we got here. My name is Sylvia Warren. I'm 47 years old. And for the past 22 years, my family has believed I was a glorified security guard. Growing up in the Warren household meant understanding one thing clearly: service had a hierarchy, and my Uncle Raymond sat at the top: Vietnam, 2 Purple Hearts, Bronze Star with Valor. He'd earned his place at the head of every table, and nobody questioned his authority on what constituted real military experience. I was 11 when I first heard him explain the difference. Infantry, artillery, armor. That's the tip of the spear, he'd said, pointing his fork at my older cousin Dean, who was shipping out for basic. Everything else is just support. He'd said that last word like it tasted sour. I joined the Army Military Police Corps in 1998. I was 22 years old, and I believed I was following in the family tradition of service. Raymond's response: MPS, so you'll be writing parking tickets on base? That was the first time. It wasn't the last. Wasn't. The thing about military police is that civilians, and even some veterans, picture traffic stops and gate duty. They imagine boredom. They imagine safety. They don't imagine convoy security through active insurgent territory. They don't imagine being the first responders to IED attacks, the ones who secure the scene while medevac birds circle overhead. They don't imagine detainee operations, base defense, or the particular nightmare of manning a checkpoint in a city where every vehicle could be carrying enough explosives to level a building. But I learned early that explanations were wasted breath in the Warren family. How's the gate guarding going? Raymond would ask at every gathering, and my cousins would chuckle, and my mother would change the subject, and I would smile because silence had become the safest armor I owned. I deployed 3 times, Iraq twice, Afghanistan once. I made staff sergeant, then sergeant first class. I received commendations I never mentioned and saw things I couldn't describe. When I came home for good in 2011, I took a job with the county sheriff's department. Quiet work, steady. I bought a small house outside of town, adopted a German shepherd named Booker, and learned to live with the distance my family had already created. Some wars aren't fought with fists. They're won in what happens next. I stopped trying to explain around year 4. Apparently, even silence was too much. Raymond's 80th birthday was supposed to be a celebration. The Warren family had rented out the back room at the Elks Lodge, the same room where we'd held his 70th, his 75th, and approximately 47 other gatherings that required enough space for 3 generations of Warrens to spread out and compare themselves to each other. I almost didn't come. The invitation had arrived 6 weeks prior, cream cardstock, gold lettering, my name spelled wrong. Sylvia, 22 years, and they still couldn't get the Y right. But my mother had called. It might be his last big one, honey. Please. So I drove 3 hours in my pickup wearing clean Carhartt and my good boots, and I walked into that room at 1:30 p.m. carrying a wrapped bottle of Woodford Reserve that I knew he'd never open. The room was already full. Cousins I hadn't seen in years. Their children, now grown with children of their own. My brother Alan and his wife carefully not making eye contact. my mother, looking relieved and anxious in equal measure. And at the center of it all, Raymond Warren, seated in what could only be described as a throne, a high-backed chair decorated with red, white, and blue streamers, positioned beneath a banner that read, "Honoring 80 years of service and sacrifice." Photographs lined the wall behind him: his army portrait, his unit in Vietnam, his medals framed and mounted, news clippings from the local paper yellowed with age, celebrating his homecoming in 1971. Not a single photograph of me. I wasn't surprised. Disappointed had stopped being an option years ago. "Sylvia," my mother intercepted me near the punch bowl, her smile tight. "You came. I said I would. Your uncle's been asking about you." I doubted that sincerely, but I nodded. "I'll say hello." "Maybe don't." She hesitated. "He's been in a mood. Dean's promotion came through." "Lieutenant Colonel. Raymond's been talking about it all morning. Dean, infantry, the tip of the spear." "I'll keep it short," I said. I made my way toward the throne. Raymond was holding court, surrounded by my cousins and their spouses, telling a story I'd heard approximately 70 times about a firefight near Da Nang. He looked old. 80 years had carved deep lines into his face, but his eyes were still sharp, still measuring everyone who approached against some invisible standard most of us would never meet. "Uncle Raymond." I waited for a pause in his story. "Happy birthday." He turned, looked me up and down, took in the Carhartt, the practical boots, the absence of anything resembling military bearing. "Sylvia," he said my name correctly at least. "Still playing cop? Still serving the community?" He accepted the whiskey without comment, set it aside with the other gifts. "Your mother says you're doing fine." "I am." "Good, good." His attention was already drifting back to his audience. "Dean's making lieutenant colonel, you know. Infantry, following in the family tradition." "I heard." "That's great news. 30 years he'll have in by the time he retires. Real career. Real service." Raymond's gaze sharpened, and I recognized the look, the same one he'd had since I was 22. Not like pushing papers and checking IDs. A few people shifted uncomfortably. My cousin Marcus, Dean's younger brother, had the decency to study his shoes. "I served my time," I said quietly. "Time, sure. But service?" Raymond shook his head. "Service means something, Sylvia. It means sacrifice. It means being in the fight, not watching the fight from behind a gate." The room had gone still. "MPS serve," I said. My voice didn't shake. My hands stayed at my sides. "MPS support." Raymond leaned forward in his chair. "And there's nothing wrong with that. Someone has to do the easy jobs. Someone has to stand at checkpoints and wave vehicles through. But don't confuse it with what Dean did, what I did, what the real soldiers do. He wasn't finished. He was never finished. You want to know the difference between a real veteran and a gate guard, Sylvia? A real veteran has stories. A real veteran has scars inside and out. A real veteran bled for this country." He gestured to the wall of photographs behind him. You just stood there, waiting for something to happen." 43 people. I counted them in the silence that followed. 43 people, and not one of them spoke. She just guarded gates. That's not real service. That's standing around waiting for something to happen. He said it loudly enough for everyone to hear. Loudly enough that there would be no ambiguity, no softening of the message, no pretending later that he'd meant something else. I picked up a plate. I took a slice of cake from the table, white cake with buttercream frosting, his favorite. I held it while he watched me, waiting for a response, waiting for the argument he'd been trying to provoke for 2 decades. I set the plate down on the nearest table. I folded my hands in front of me, and I waited. Because I had learned something in 19 hours at Checkpoint Valor that Raymond Warren had never understood, not in Vietnam, not in 50 years of telling war stories at family gatherings. Sometimes the most dangerous thing in the room is the person who isn't speaking. The door to the back room opened. A man walked in, tall, black, mid-50s, but built like someone who still ran 5 miles before dawn. His posture was unmistakable. 30-plus years of military service written into every line of his body. He wore a dark suit, American flag pin on the lapel, and around his neck, hanging from a pale blue ribbon, was a medal I recognized immediately, the Medal of Honor. He scanned the room once. His gaze passed over Raymond, over the photographs, over the banner celebrating 80 years of service and sacrifice. Then his eyes found me, and Sergeant Major William Collins stopped walking. The room noticed him before they understood him. Conversation stuttered. Forks paused midway to mouth. My cousin Marcus straightened instinctively, the way civilians do when they recognize military bearing without knowing exactly what they're looking at. But it was the medal that commanded the silence. Pale blue ribbon, gold star surrounded by a wreath of oak leaves. The Medal of Honor doesn't whisper. It announces itself, and everyone in that room, even the ones who'd never served a day, knew what they were seeing. Raymond rose from his throne, slowly using the armrest for leverage, but he rose. Because whatever else he was, my uncle understood protocol. He understood hierarchy. Sir, Raymond's voice had shifted, softer now, respectful in a way I'd never heard directed at anyone but himself. Welcome. I'm Raymond Warren, Vietnam, 68 to 71. Can I help you find someone? Collins didn't answer immediately. He was still looking at me. His gaze had dropped from my face to my collar, to the small pin I wore on the lapel of my Carhartt jacket, gray enamel, barely visible against the brown canvas. Most people didn't notice it. Most people who noticed it didn't know what it meant. My mother had asked about it once. Just something from my unit, I'd told her. She'd accepted that the way she accepted all my non-answers about those years. But Collins wasn't most people. His expression shifted. Something tightened around his eyes, recognition, memory, the particular weight of shared history that civilians never quite understand. That pin, he said quietly, Checkpoint Valor, September 2005. The words hit me somewhere below my ribs. 18 years. 18 years since I'd heard anyone say those words out loud who actually knew what they meant. Yes, Sergeant Major. My voice was steady. It had to be. Sergeant Major. Raymond stepped forward, positioning himself between Collins and me, reasserting his role as host, as patriarch, as the ranking veteran in the room. I didn't catch your name, sir. And I have to say, that's quite a medal you're wearing. We'd be honored to hear your story. This is a gathering of veterans, real military family, you understand. Collins turned to Raymond for the first time. The silence stretched. My name is William Collins, he said. Sergeant Major, United States Army, retired, 3rd Infantry Division. And I'm not here for your party, Mr. Warren. Raymond blinked. I'm here for her. He pointed at me. Every head in the room turned. 43 pairs of eyes following his finger like a compass needle swinging north. My mother's hand flew to her mouth. My brother Alan took a step backward, as if proximity to me had suddenly become dangerous. Dean, Lieutenant Colonel Dean, the tip of the spear went very still. I don't understand, Raymond said. His voice had hardened, defense mechanisms rising. Sylvia? She was MP. She guarded. I know exactly what she did. Collins cut him off. Not rudely, just completely. I know because I was there. The room had the quality of held breath now. No one moved. Even the children had gone quiet, sensing the shift in atmospheric pressure the way animals sense storms. Collins reached into his jacket pocket. He withdrew a photograph. Faded. Creased from years of handling. He held it up so the room could see, though he was really only showing one person. Checkpoint Valor, he said. Route Tampa, 12 kilometers south of Baghdad. September 14th, 2005. You know what this is? Raymond squinted at the photograph. Looks like a checkpoint. Barriers, sandbags. It was a checkpoint. For 19 hours, it was also the only thing standing between a convoy of wounded soldiers and an insurgent assault force. Collins lowered the photograph. 47 American servicemen, Mr. Warren. Medevac couldn't reach us. Too much ground fire. QRF was pinned down 6 clicks north. We had 1 functioning vehicle, limited ammunition, and 11 wounded who couldn't be moved. He paused, and we had 1 MP sergeant who refused to give ground. The photograph trembled slightly in his hand. The only sign that this story cost him something to tell. The insurgents hit us at 0300. First wave was small, probing attack, testing our defenses. Sergeant Warren held the north barrier with 3 other MPs while the rest of us secured the wounded. She took a round in her left shoulder during that first engagement. My mother made a sound. Small. Wounded. She didn't report it, Collins continued. I found out later she'd packed the wound with gauze, taped it, and returned to her position within 4 minutes. 4 minutes, Mr. Warren. That's how long your niece took to treat a gunshot wound before she went back to fighting. Raymond had gone pale. His hand gripped the armrest of his throne, knuckles white. Second wave came at 600. Heavier. They'd brought RPGs. We lost 2 vehicles and the south barrier took heavy damage. I was commanding what was left of my squad when I took shrapnel to both legs. Collins's voice remained level. Clinical, I couldn't walk. I couldn't fight. I was bleeding out in the dirt when your niece appeared above me. He looked at me then. Really looked at me. The way soldiers look at each other when words aren't adequate. She dragged me 40 meters to cover while under active fire, applied tourniquets to both my legs, returned fire with her sidearm while compressing my femoral artery with her other hand. A muscle in his jaw tightened. I remember her voice, calm, steady. You're not dying at my checkpoint, Sergeant. That's not how this works. The photograph was shaking harder now. Collins steadied it with his other hand. Third wave hit at 1400. By then, we'd been holding for 11 hours. Ammunition was critical. We'd lost 6 men. The wounded were deteriorating. And Sergeant Warren, with a bullet still in her shoulder with my blood still on her uniform, organized what was left of us into a defensive formation that held for 8 more hours. He turned to face Raymond directly. 8 more hours, Mr. Warren. Your niece held that checkpoint for 8 more hours on no sleep, no resupply, and no relief. She coordinated fire sectors. She rationed ammunition. She kept 11 wounded men alive through 3 more assaults. When QRF finally reached us at 2,200, they found 47 Americans still breathing. Collins stepped closer to Raymond. Close enough that my uncle had to tilt his head back to maintain eye contact. You said she just guarded gates. You said she was standing around waiting for something to happen. His voice dropped. Mr. Warren, I have spent 18 years trying to find the woman who saved my life at Checkpoint Valor. 18 years. I've written letters to the Pentagon. I've filed FOIA requests. I've contacted every MP unit that served in that sector. He reached into his jacket again. This time, he withdrew a case. Black velvet, hinged. Do you know why it took me so long? Because her commanding officer submitted her for the Silver Star 3 times, and each time the paperwork was lost. Each time some desk officer decided an MP didn't deserve recognition for combat that wasn't supposed to happen. The case opened with a soft click. Silver Star on a red, white, and blue ribbon. The citation beneath it, typed and official, bearing my name. I made it my mission, Collins said. When I received this, he touched the Medal of Honor at his chest. I told them I wouldn't accept it unless they found the records, unless they acknowledged what happened at Checkpoint Valor, unless they gave Sergeant Sylvia Warren what she earned. The room was frozen. My mother was crying silently, tears streaming down her face. My brother had his hand over his mouth. Dean, who had been infantry, who had been the tip of the spear, who had been everything I wasn't supposed to be, looked like he'd been struck. And Raymond Warren, decorated Vietnam veteran, family patriarch, the man who'd spent 22 years dismissing me as a gate guard, stood motionless in front of his throne. The color had drained from his face entirely. His hands hung at his sides, limp, the strength gone out of them. His mouth opened, then closed, then opened again. I didn't. He stopped, swallowed. She never said, "You never asked." My voice came out quieter than I expected. 22 years, Uncle Raymond. You never once asked me what I actually did. You just decided you already knew. But the checkpoint, the injuries, he was grasping now, reaching for something solid in a world that had shifted beneath his feet. Why didn't you tell anyone? Why didn't you show them your records, your citations? What citations? I let the question hang. The ones that kept getting lost? The ones that never made it through the system because MPs weren't supposed to see combat, so officially we didn't. I stepped forward. I spent 11 years trying to explain. 11 years of just gate duty and parking tickets and the easy jobs. After a while, I stopped because some things can't be explained to people who've already decided what the truth is. Collins moved then, deliberate, precise. He positioned himself directly in front of me, and he saluted. The Medal of Honor recipient, the sergeant major, the man who had survived because I refused to let him die in the dirt at Checkpoint Valor. He saluted me. "Sergeant Warren." His voice carried through the silent room. "Ma'am, it was always meant to be yours." He extended the case. The silver star gleamed under the fluorescent lights of the Elks Lodge, and I couldn't move, couldn't speak, couldn't do anything but stare at the proof of something I'd stopped believing anyone would ever acknowledge. Behind me, I heard a sound. A heavy thump. I turned. Raymond Warren had collapsed into his throne. Not unconscious, his eyes were open, fixed on the metal in Collins's hands, but diminished somehow, smaller, as if 22 years of certainty had been the only thing holding him upright, and now that certainty was gone. "I didn't know," he whispered. Collins hadn't lowered his salute. "Ma'am," he said again, "I am here to formally present you with the Silver Star for gallantry in action. Checkpoint Valor, September 14th, 2005. He waited. The room waited. And somewhere in the silence, I heard what Raymond Warren had never understood about service. It wasn't the medals. It wasn't the recognition. It wasn't the stories told at family gatherings or the photographs mounted on walls. It was this: the person who stands at the checkpoint in the dark, waiting for the thing they hope never comes, knowing it's coming anyway and holding the line when it does. That was the job. I reached for the case. My fingers closed around the velvet case. The weight of it was nothing, a few ounces of metal and ribbon and official documentation. But the weight of what it represented pressed against my chest like a compression bandage, tight and necessary and long overdue. "Thank you, Sergeant Major." My voice didn't waver. It had learned not to, somewhere between the first gunshot and the 19th hour. Collins lowered his salute. His eyes held mine for a moment longer, the silent communication of people who have shared something that can't be translated into civilian language. "The honor is mine, Sergeant Warren." Behind me, the room remained frozen. 43 people suspended in the aftermath of revelation, still processing the distance between what they'd believed and what they'd just witnessed. I turned to face them. My mother had both hands pressed against her mouth now, tears cutting tracks through her makeup. My brother Alan looked like he'd swallowed something sharp. Dean, Lieutenant Colonel Dean, had removed his glasses and was cleaning them with methodical focus, the way people do when they can't bear to look at what's in front of them. And Raymond Warren sat in his throne, like a man who had just learned the foundation of his house was sand. His hands gripped the armrests, but there was no strength in them. His eyes moved from me to Collins to the metal case and back again, searching for something that would make this make sense. Sylvia? His voice cracked on my name. I didn't all these years. I thought, you thought what you wanted to think. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. You decided what my service was worth before I ever put on a uniform. Everything after that was just confirmation of what you'd already chosen to believe. But if you'd just told us, told you what, Uncle Raymond? I stepped closer to his throne. That I was shot, that I held a man's artery closed while insurgents tried to overrun our position, that I spent 11 years filing paperwork for recognition that kept disappearing because someone in an office decided MPS don't deserve combat medals. The words came easier than I expected. 18 years of silence, and now they flowed like water through a broken dam. I tried telling you. Remember? 2006, the year I came back from my first deployment, I started to tell you about convoy security, about the IEDs, about what we actually did out there. You interrupted me to talk about Dean's promotion. I let that land. I tried again in 2009. You told me that support roles were important, but I shouldn't inflate my experience. Raymond's face had gone gray. You didn't want the truth, I said quietly. You wanted a story that fit the one you'd already written, the one where infantry bleeds and everyone else watches, the one where your service was the only service that counted. That's not. He stopped, swallowed. I was proud of my service. I was trying to teach you what sacrifice meant. You were trying to teach me that I didn't matter. The words hung in the air like smoke. Collins shifted beside me, not intervening, just present, a witness to something that had needed witnessing for 2 decades. Checkpoint Valor wasn't an anomaly, I said. It was the worst day, yes. But there were other days, other checkpoints, other convoys where we took fire and returned it and kept moving because that's what MPs do. We don't get to choose when the fight comes to us. We just have to be ready when it does. I looked at the photographs lining the wall behind Raymond's throne. His service immortalized, his sacrifice displayed. You've had your recognition for 50 years, I said. Your medals are framed. Your stories are legend. You've sat at the head of every table and told everyone what real service looks like. And no one ever questioned you. I held up the Silver Star case. This is the first time anyone in this family has seen evidence that I served it all. The first time in 22 years. I closed the case with a soft click, and it took a Medal of Honor recipient walking through that door to make it happen. Because my word was never enough. My service was never enough. I was never enough. Raymond's mouth opened. No sound came out. Sylvia, my mother's voice, thick with tears. Sweetheart, we didn't know. You didn't ask. I turned to her. You let him say those things for 22 years, Mom. Every gathering, every holiday, every time he called me a gate guard or asked about my parking tickets. You never once said that's enough. You never once asked me what really happened. She flinched as if I'd struck her. I was trying to keep the peace. You were keeping his peace. I didn't let bitterness creep into my voice. I was past bitterness. And I don't blame you for that. But don't pretend you didn't know something was wrong. Don't pretend you didn't see me go quiet every time he started. Don't pretend you didn't notice that I stopped coming to these things unless you called 3 times and guilted me into it. The silence that followed was absolute. Collins cleared his throat. If I may, he said, addressing the room but looking at Raymond, I need to tell you something about your niece that isn't in any official record. Raymond's eyes lifted, wary now, bracing for another blow. When I was bleeding out at Checkpoint Valor, I told her to leave me. We were taking fire from 3 directions. The north barrier was failing. Every second she spent treating my wounds was a second she wasn't returning fire. Colin's voice remained steady, but something in his eyes had shifted. She looked at me, this young MP sergeant with a bullet in her shoulder, and she said, "I don't leave people behind, Sergeant. That's not how this works." He paused. "I have received the Medal of Honor. I have shaken hands with 3 presidents. I have been called a hero by people who don't know what that word costs." He touched the pale blue ribbon at his chest. "But I am alive today because Sylvia Warren refused to calculate whether my life was worth the risk. She just decided it was." Raymond made a sound. Low, wounded. "That's not gate guarding, Mr. Warren. That's not support. That's the same choice every soldier makes when they decide to put themselves between danger and the people they're protecting." Collins fixed Raymond with a look that had probably silenced generals. "Your niece made that choice. She made it wounded. She made it exhausted. She made it 19 hours into a siege that should have killed us all. And she never told anyone because the Army lost her paperwork and her family had already decided she didn't count." The accusation landed like artillery. Raymond's head dropped. His shoulders curved inward. For the first time in my memory, he looked his age, 80 years of certainty crumbling into something smaller and sadder. "I'm sorry." His voice was barely audible. "Sylvia, I'm sorry. I didn't know. You chose not to know. I didn't soften it. There's a difference. I know there is." He looked up at me with eyes that had gone wet. "I spent so long being the veteran in this family, the one who served, the one who sacrificed. And when you joined up, I thought—" He stopped, swallowed. "I thought you were trying to take that from me, trying to claim something you hadn't earned. I wasn't trying to take anything. I was trying to serve my country. I know that now." His voice broke. "I know." I stood there, holding the Silver Star case, looking at the man who had shaped my family's understanding of military service and, by extension, their understanding of me for 3 decades. 22 years of silence, 22 years of dismissal, 22 years of being the footnote in a story that was always about him, and now he wanted absolution. "I forgive you for not knowing," I said finally. "Some things are classified. Some things can't be shared. That's not your fault." Relief flickered across his face. "But I don't forgive you for not asking." I let the words settle. "I don't forgive you for deciding what my service was worth before you had any evidence. I don't forgive you for teaching this entire family that I didn't matter. That's not ignorance, Uncle Raymond. That's choice." The relief vanished. "What do you want me to do?" His voice had gone hollow. "What can I do to make this right?" I looked at him for a long moment. The throne, the banner, the photographs that had never included me. "Nothing," I said. "There's nothing you need to do. I'm not here for an apology. I'm not here for recognition. I stopped needing those things a long time ago. Then why did you come?" I glanced at Collins. He gave me a small nod, permission, acknowledgement, something in between. "Because Sergeant Major Collins asked me to," I said. "He's been trying to find me for 18 years. He wanted to deliver this medal in person, and he wanted witnesses." I looked around the room at my frozen family. He wanted the people who dismissed me to understand what they'd dismissed. Raymond's face crumpled. "That's it," he whispered. "That's all I am to you now, a witness." I considered the question. For 22 years, I had wanted him to understand, to see me, to acknowledge that my service meant something. I had wanted it so badly that I'd stopped wanting it at all, buried the need so deep that I'd forgotten it was there. Now, standing in this room with the proof of everything I'd done hanging from my hand, I realized something. His understanding didn't change anything. It didn't bring back the soldiers we'd lost at Checkpoint Valor. It didn't heal the shoulder that still ached when the weather changed. It didn't restore the years I'd spent believing that my family saw me clearly when they'd never seen me at all. "You're my uncle," I said finally. "That's what you've always been. That's what you'll always be. But you're not my commanding officer, Raymond. You don't get to determine whether my service counted." I tucked the silver star case into my jacket pocket. "It counted," I said. "It counted to the 47 men at Checkpoint Valor. It counted to Sergeant Major Collins. It counts to me." I paused. "Whether it counts to you is your business," and I turned to leave. "Sylvia?" "Wait." Dean's voice. "Lieutenant Colonel Dean, the tip of the spear." I stopped, but didn't turn around. "I didn't know," he said. "I swear to God I didn't know." "I know you didn't." "If I had," his voice cracked. "If I had known what you went through, I would have said something. I would have stopped him." Now I turned. Dean stood in the middle of the room, looking smaller than I'd ever seen him. His infantry confidence had evaporated, replaced by something rawer and more honest. "You could have asked," I said gently. "Any time in 22 years. You could have asked me what my deployments were like. You could have asked about convoy security or checkpoint operations or what MPS actually do in a combat zone. But you didn't, Dean, because Uncle Raymond told you what my service was worth, and you believed him." His face went red. "That's not..." "It is." I didn't say it with anger. I said it with the exhaustion of someone who had stopped being surprised by disappointment a long time ago. "You're not a bad person, Dean. You're not even wrong about your own service. But you believed what was easy to believe and you never questioned it." He had no response to that. "I'm not angry," I said. "Not anymore. I was for a long time. But anger takes energy, and I spent all of mine at Checkpoint Valor." I smiled, small, tired, genuine. I'm just done explaining myself to people who've already decided what they think they know. I looked around the room one last time. My mother still crying. My brother unable to meet my eyes. Dean stripped of his certainty. Raymond collapsed in his throne like a puppet with cut strings. "Happy birthday, Uncle Raymond," I said. And I walked out. Collins fell into step beside me in the parking lot. The autumn air was sharp and clean after the suffocating atmosphere of the Elks Lodge. I stopped beside my pickup and leaned against the tailgate, suddenly exhausted in a way that had nothing to do with physical fatigue. "That was harder than the checkpoint," I said. Collins huffed a small laugh. "Different kind of enemy. Yeah." I looked up at the sky. Gray clouds, late afternoon light, the kind of day that didn't promise anything. "Thank you for finding me, for all of this. You earned it, every bit of it." He reached into his pocket and withdrew a card. "Listen, Sergeant Warren, I know you've built a life for yourself, and I'm not trying to disrupt that, but there are people who need to hear what you know, what you learned at Checkpoint Valor and every checkpoint before it." I took the card. "Department of Defense Instructor Development Division. We're building a training program for MP units deploying to high-risk zones," Collins said. "Your experience, specifically your experience holding defensive positions under sustained assault, is exactly what they need to learn. If you're interested, give them a call." I turned the card over in my hands. "I've been out for 12 years. Experience like yours doesn't expire." He smiled, the first real smile I'd seen from him. "Think about it." He extended his hand. I took it. Sergeant Warren. His grip was firm, his eyes steady. It was my honor, Sergeant Major Collins. I returned the grip. The honor was mine. He walked to his car. I watched him go, the Medal of Honor glinting briefly in the late afternoon light before he disappeared behind the wheel. I didn't go to the Warren family Christmas that year. I didn't go to Easter or the 4th of July picnic or Raymond's 81st birthday. Not out of spite, not out of pride, but because I no longer needed to step into a place that asked me to shrink. My mother called, of course, more than once. "He's changed, Sylvia. He tells everyone what you did now. He keeps the newspaper article Collins arranged on his nightstand. Good, I told her. I'm glad he knows. But he wants to see you. He wants to apologize properly. He already apologized. He wants to do more. He wants to. Mom, I kept my voice gentle. I forgive Uncle Raymond for what he didn't know. But I can't pretend the last 22 years didn't happen. I can't walk into that house and act like I belong at the family table when everyone in that room spent 2 decades treating me like I was something less. She went quiet for a long moment. I'm sorry, she said finally. I should have said something all those years. I should have stopped him. Yeah, I said. You should have. It wasn't cruel. It was just true. I love you, Mom. That hasn't changed. But I need time, and I need you to understand that time might not have an end date. She cried. I waited. Eventually, she said she understood. I don't know if she did. But she stopped asking me to come back. 6 months after Raymond's birthday, I got a call from the Department of Defense. The training program Collins had mentioned was being formalized. They wanted someone who had commanded defensive positions under extended assault, someone who understood the specific challenges of checkpoint operations in hostile territory, someone who had held the line for 19 hours with a bullet in her shoulder. Sergeant Warren, the voice on the phone said, "We'd like to offer you a position as a consulting instructor at Fort Leonard Wood. The work is advisory, reviewing tactics, developing curriculum, occasionally speaking to units before deployment." I took 3 days to think about it. Then I said yes. I work at Fort Leonard Wood now. No combat patches on my shoulder, no medals on my chest, just Sylvia Warren, GS-11 Tactical Training Division. The young MPs call me ma'am. They ask about convoy security and checkpoint operations and what it's really like when everything goes wrong at once. I tell them the truth, not the version that belongs in official reports, not the sanitized narrative that fits on a citation. The real truth, the 19-hour truth about fear and exhaustion and the specific kind of stubbornness that keeps you standing when everything else says to quit. Some of them will face checkpoints of their own. Some of them will hold defensive positions while waiting for relief that might not come. And when that happens, they'll remember something I said. Maybe it will help. Maybe it won't. But they'll know that someone who looked like them, someone who wore the same crossed pistols, who heard the same just MP dismissals, once held the line when it mattered most. That's enough for me now. Recognition isn't why I served. It's not why I stayed. I stayed because I made a promise to the man bleeding out on the ground next to me. And promises don't need an audience to matter. My uncle said I just guarded gates. He was wrong. I didn't guard the gate. I was the gate. If you enjoyed this story about quiet service winning over loud arrogance, hit that like button and let me know what you think in the comments. And if you haven't subscribed yet, make sure to subscribe and ring that notification bell for more stories just like this one. Thanks for watching.